Are you interested in either a Suzuki DR650 or a Honda CRF300L? Or maybe you're interested in both of them? If you are, step on in because I'm about to talk about both those motorcycles. Hello, D-Rock here. Welcome to the channel. I hope you all are well. It is an absolutely dreary, rainy, late January day here in southwestern Utah. So I figured I would make this video about the Suzuki DR650 and the Honda CRF300L. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. I've had lots of comments about people asking me which do I prefer over the two bikes. And to be honest with you, that's a tough question. And it has a tough answer too. Maybe not so tough. I think overall, I prefer both bikes because I own both bikes and I have no intention of selling both bikes. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk about the specifications of both bikes and what I ride the bikes in. So if you're intending to possibly purchase one of these bikes, maybe this will give you a better idea. And we'll go from there. So join me, and if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It helps us out tremendously. Let's get started. Okay, directly behind me is my 2023 model Suzuki DR650. At this point, I'd say it's been modified pretty well. This is not the stock form of the bike. That's one thing, I guess I could say it's good about both bikes. They are... Right now, there's lots of parts available for both bikes. Initially, it wasn't so with the Honda because it came out in 2020 and getting parts for the bike was a little difficult. However, that's caught up and now getting parts for the bike are relatively easy. However, with the Suzuki DR650, I mean, it's very easy to get what you're looking for so you can build your bike out. So generally when you're talking about motorcycles, you always want to include the specs. That's very important. So let's go ahead and talk about the specs of the Suzuki DR650. I've got my little clipboard here with the reference, so forgive me. I just don't have all this off the top of my head all the time. Let's go ahead. So Suzuki DR650, as far as the engine, is a 644cc air-cooled single cylinder. Now let's talk about it 1 second. I get a lot of questions about the air-cooled aspect of this bike because I live in the desert. And I've had my DR650 for almost a year now. And I've ridden it plenty of times in triple degree heat. And I've had no problems whatsoever with the bike. For example, like overheating or anything of that nature. I haven't had a problem yet. So thus far in my experience with an air-cooled bike, out in an extremely hot desert, no problems as of yet. Moving on. Horsepower, 43 horsepower. Okay, transmission, it is 5-speed. It is 5-speed. It hasn't been that big of a deal for me. Would I like 6-speed? Probably. But I don't mind the 5-speed. Front tire is 21, rear tire is 17. The rear tire can be a little tricky because finding tire sizes, certain types of tires in that size 17 can be interesting. I have Tusk D Sports, not only on the Suzuki, but also on the Honda. As a matter of fact, on all my bikes. Not a problem. Moving on. Seat height of the DR650 is 34.8 inches. I stand 5 foot 10 inches. So when I am on this bike, and I have not lowered it, I'm on my tiptoes. Unless, of course, I have my gear on the bike, and then it weights it down a little bit, so that gives me a little lower. So I'm not quite on my tiptoes, but I'm used to riding taller bikes with the CRF, the Suzuki, my KLR 650, so it's really not a problem for me. Moving on. Ground clearance of the Suzuki DR650 is 10.4 inches, and the curb weight is 366 pounds. Now, that may not sound like a lot of weight. If you're coming from a KLR650 or like a Royal Enfield Himalayan or a Tenere or something, yes, that's definitely lighter. However, it's still heavy. That's still heavy. And the way I have the bike modded, now I've got some armor on it. I've got a much larger gas tank. I've got all the gear. It all adds up. And you really notice the weight when you're by yourself, way out in the backcountry, and you drop the bike. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Fuel capacity with the stock tank is 3.2 gallons. Now let's talk about the stock fuel tank. One thing I did not like about the stock fuel tank, especially the bike fell over, is it leaked all over the place. I'll point that out right now. Also, the range on the DR650 on the stock tank at 3.2 gallons. Let's see, I figured probably safely saying 120 miles. Maybe you could push it out to 140. Those of you that ride still with your stock tank, feel free to leave a comment in your experience. But I always got a little skittish at 100 miles. And this bugged me in the backcountry because you get lost, you ride, miles add up. I always carried spare gas. Anyway, I alleviated that problem by adding the Acerbis 6.6 gallon tank to the bike, which now gives me a range of around 350 miles on the tank. So stock tank, 3.2 gallons. Maybe you can squeeze 140 miles out of that. I'm not sure. I always topped off just over 100 miles. Okay, behind me is my 2021 model Honda CRF300L. So let's go ahead and dive in on this one real quick. The engine is a 286cc liquid-cooled single cylinder. So also, let me just say, just like with the Suzuki, I ride this in triple-digit heat, middle of the desert. I've had no problems with the bike overheating or anything of that nature. Horsepower. 27 horsepower, transmission, 6-speed. I like the 6-speed. That definitely, the sixth gear definitely comes in when you're just cruising, and it's not very, if you hit any types of hills, forget about it. But it's still nice. Moving on, front tire is 21, rear tire is 18. So the Suzuki is 34.8 inches. The Honda is 34.7 inches. Suzuki slightly taller. So same thing, on my tiptoes on this bike. Now, let me just also mention that there is a short model now available for the Honda CRF300L. I have not seen one. I don't know how hard they are to come by. I would imagine pretty difficult because, I don't know, between the short model and the rallies, forget it. I just don't see them where I live. So the short model, the seat height is 32.7 inches. So that's significant. That really is. If you're a shorter rider and you don't like being on your tiptoes, you might want to consider the short model. Ground clearance on the standard model is 11.2 inches. Now on the short model, ground clearance is 9.6 inches. This is also something that you may want to consider. Moving on, curb weight of the Honda is 306 pounds. So 60 pounds lighter than the DR650. 60 pounds. That may not sound like a lot, but trust me, it's a lot. Now, stock tank, 2.1 gallons. And once again, I never pushed it with the CRF. After 100 miles, it starts getting into the back of my head. Okay. So I'd always gas up around 100 miles. I'm presuming we could get 120, maybe extend that out to 140. I'm not sure. I never did, but you may be able to do that. Now you can get an aftermarket gas tank for the Honda CRF300L. I think you can get a 3-gallon tank, maybe a little bit larger. I haven't done that yet. I've just stick with stock, and I usually carry plenty of extra gas, like a roto packs and fuel bottles when I go out in the desert. And I still don't feel very comfortable because I get deep out there, man, let me tell you. So that's something to consider about fuel capacity. Also, there are aftermarket gas tanks available for the CRF300L. Now, I should probably mention the suspension on both bikes. The suspension on the Honda is notoriously bad. The DR650 is a little bit better. I weigh about 175 pounds, so the suspension on the Honda doesn't necessarily bother me. Now, when I have a bunch of my gear strapped to the bike, of course, it's sitting down. I may get to the point of swapping out the suspension on the Honda. However, I haven't felt it necessary or thought about it on the DR650. So I'm also not jumping these bikes or riding them in that type of terrain. I'll go into more difficult terrain on the Honda than I will on the DR650. And I'm working back to the reason that is because of weight. Weight is extremely important. I've learned this the hard way. And like I mentioned, the DR650 is 60 pounds heavier than the Honda stock. So once you go adding stuff to the bike, you're adding your gear, you're adding your armor, you're adding extra gas and all this stuff, these things add up, especially when you're way deep in the backcountry and you're traveling by yourself. Now, you can remove all the stuff off the bike to pick a bike up, pick up a drop bike, which I have to do, but I get a little more peace of mind when I'm deep in the backcountry and I know I might be getting into some difficult terrain when I'm on the Honda versus the DR650. I just have a little more peace of mind on the Honda because I know I can deal with the weight of the bike a little better. If that makes any sense. As far as the riding is concerned, comfort. Both the Honda and the Suzuki fit me. I'm 5'10" with a 32-inch inseam. I find both bikes quite comfortable, as in regards to my body, particularly my knees, no problems. I have put lowered foot pegs on my DR650, which increase the comfort of that bike. Both bikes are just fine to stand and ride. Honestly, I think the Honda is more comfortable than the Suzuki, but both are just fine for the type of riding I do. On the road, the Honda is fine for your typical scenic backway riding. This is a great bike if you intend to ride back roads and don't mind riding at 65 miles per hour or below. The Honda just isn't built for speed. Don't get me wrong, you could certainly ride the Honda around the world, it just wouldn't be fast. And the Honda isn't ideal on the interstate at higher speeds. Lack of power and lightweight make it a chore when dealing with wind and passing semis. However, the long stretches between maintenance intervals is extremely inviting. Off-road, the Honda is great at tackling forest roads, rocky desert roads, and anything that could be considered light, very light, technical terrain. The Honda is not good at enduro at all. The Honda is my choice for deep backcountry moto camping, simply because I know I can deal with the weight of the bike if I have to. For example, I'm fairly confident if I strip the Honda, I could probably push or drag it out of a ditch. Weight matters, folks. Also, I feel that the Honda more than likely will get me back from wherever it is I'm going. I don't question its reliability. The DR650 is fantastic on scenic backways and blacktop at speeds of 65 miles per hour. With the extra weight and power, the DR650 is also fine at interstate speeds. I think the DR650 is safer to ride on the interstate than the Honda. It's more stable and can get around a semi with no problem. Is it ideal for traveling on interstates? Not really, but it can certainly tackle them. With the addition of lowered foot pegs and a seat swap, long distances on pavement are no problem on my DR650. Off-road, the DR650 can do everything the Honda can. You can also get the benefit of more power. The DR is a great choice for backcountry moto camping also. The DR is simply not called the Bush Pig for nothing. An absolutely reliable bike, it's also easy to work on. Not modern by any sense, there may simply just be less things that can go wrong with this bike. I do consider the weight of this bike for solo deep backcountry exploring, and it's not my first choice. I have to be realistic. Trying to push or drag the DR out of a ditch by myself would be more daunting than with the Honda. However, I have no doubts about the capability of the DR, and with the right rider, jumping over logs wouldn't be a problem at all. All right, well, I've got a slight break in the weather. Not much, it's drizzling a little bit, but I could bring the bikes outside and stand outside without getting completely soaked. But what I want to talk about real quick is here they are side by side. And one thing I will mention, and this is important to a lot of people, I guess you could say the Honda is a more modern bike than the DR650. So if you're into a little bit of glitz, the display on the Honda gives you things that the DR650 will not. So this is what you get on the DR650 as far as a display. Not a whole lot here. You got a speedometer, odometer, and an indicator as far as neutral, turn signals, and high beams. That's it. And over here on the Honda, you've got this display, which I would say is a little more modern. Digital, of course. You've got, it shows your speed, gas consumption, how much gas you got left, RPMs, and it also has a gear indicator. It tells you what gear you're in. You can also get the Honda with ABS. As far as I know, DR650 does not come with any ABS. My Honda does not have ABS. And I should also mention as well that when I talked about the engine on both motorcycles, the Honda is EFI, it's fuel injected, and the DR650 is carbureted. So when I say the Honda is a little more modern, not only do you get the fuel injection, you get 6 speeds, and you get a digital display with a few more things versus not on the DR650. Now, some may argue that having a little more glitz and these types of things on a more modern bike eventually lead to problems. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I, for one, don't like to mess with buttons when I start my motorcycle up to go riding. I don't have to push a bunch of buttons and get riding styles and things like this programmed in. It's just not something that's important to me. So as far as being more modern in that aspect, it doesn't matter to me. So I'm happy with what the DR650 has. I'm happy with what the Honda has. Both these bikes I have swapped seats on. Now I will say with the Honda, the stock seat the Honda comes with, it's actually not that bad. You break it in a little bit and it's just really not that bad. However, I didn't realize that. I thought it kind of sucked right off the bat. So I went ahead and ordered a Seat Concepts. And this is the extra large, I believe, Comfort, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a fantastic seat. So I didn't do wrong. The Seat Concepts that I switched with the Honda was fantastic. But like I said, by the time it came, I had kind of broken in the stock seat and it wasn't that bad. However, the Suzuki DR650 has possibly the worst stock seat I've ever encountered. Even worse than the Yamaha XC250. And that's kind of hard to believe because that one's terrible. You will want to swap out a stock seat on a DR650 immediately. Trust me. So this is the Pro Cycle standard seat, and it is a fantastic seat. It's wide enough to give you some extreme comfort, but it's not so wide that it's going to interfere with standing. And of course, the Seat Concepts on the Honda doesn't interfere with standing either. It's cut out right here a little bit. So it's both new seats on these bikes, aftermarket, I should say, are excellent. Now, like I said, both these bikes have been modified. They are not in stock form, but we'll look at them side by side, give you an idea. Both bikes do not come with windshields. I will say the Honda Rally model does come with a windshield. However, this is not a Rally model. This is an aftermarket windshield from T-Rex Racing. And then this is an aftermarket windshield from Madstad. Okay, so let's talk price. The Honda CRF300L currently is listed as MSRP of around $5,499. That's in the United States. It's probably going to be different elsewhere in the world. Now, after you include taxes and freight and putting the bike together and all these other things the dealers like to tack on, you're probably looking, I think I got mine out the door for $6,200. So $6,200 is what I paid back at the very end of 2021 for my Honda CRF300L. Now, the Rally is going to be a little more expensive, if I am not mistaken, and having features such as ABS may make the bike a little more expensive as well. And I have no idea what the price is on the short model. So price for the Honda is lower than the DR650. Now, price for the DR650, this is a 2023 model, and I just saw a 2024 model, and in my part of the world, that price tag is $6,999. Let's just call it $7,000. So once you add in the taxes and the freight and put in and all the other stuff that's involved, you're looking probably, I think I got mine out the door for right at $8,000. So significantly more than the Honda CRF300L. Now, also with both bikes, when you add all your gear and stuff that you want to put on the bikes, you're looking at another easy $1,000 or maybe $2,000. So, you know, it all depends, but by the time it's all said and done, let's just say with the Honda, you're probably looking at around $7,500 to $8,000 once it's all done. And then with the DR650, if you're buying new, once it's all done, we're talking probably $9,000, $9,500. You know, let's be honest. One thing I'll also add is the stock headlights for both bikes suck. I put the Cyclops H4 LED light in both my Honda and Suzuki. And to wrap this up, both bikes have a purpose for me. And this video isn't about which bike is better. I think both are excellent choices for dual sport riding. So ultimately, before you buy one of these bikes, you need to ask yourself what you want to ride in and how you want to ride. Both the Honda and DR are reliable. Both have easy maintenance. Both are affordable and both are capable. Both can be used in the backcountry and both can be used to travel the world. So for me to choose which one I'll be riding, I generally consider the terrain I plan to ride in. More specifically, the more difficult the terrain is, the lighter bike I want. So there you have it, folks. I don't think you will lose with either bike, and I certainly hope this video helps. As always, thank you very much for watching. More content on the way. If you're new, please consider subscribing. It is free. It helps us out tremendously. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. D-Rock out. Adios.